tell you something. You stupid little runt. I own you.
The janitors went home.
Alright, the second video about Bangladesh will be more serious than the first. I'll be straightforward, trying to understand who owns the country. Because, come on, we all know that in this day and age, the population is far from dictating anything. Bangladesh people, how free are you? Who owns you? Who are the ones truly behind the scenes? Let's at least try to scrape the surface, since the bottom of this iceberg is too deep for us mere humans to get there. A somewhat new country, Bangladesh gained independence from Pakistan on December 16, 1971. Following a 9-month-long war of liberation, it shares borders with only two countries, India to the east, north and west, and Myanmar to the southeast. Before its independence, the region was known as East Pakistan, created during the partition of British India in 1947. Historically, the area has been under the control of several powerful empires and nations before the British took over. Bangladesh still has unresolved disputes with India, including the sharing of water from transboundary rivers and border management. They also have strained ties with Pakistan over historical issues and with Myanmar due to some border tensions, though these are not active conflicts. Follow the money. I don't think we can call a country that made $460 billion in 2022 poor, ranking 34th in GDP globally. It's just poorly distributed since it is amongst the countries with the worst GDP per capita. And I wonder, is it solely due to the size of the population? I don't think so. There surely is someone profiting from such large population. According to the CIA, the GDP of Bangladesh in 2023 was composed of approximately 51% services, 35% industry, and 11% of agriculture. I mean, there's no real surprise here, as most countries have their GDP mostly composed of services anyways. But the real question is, how well are these companies serving their population? Apparently, not that well. As of October 2024, the top 49 most valuable companies in Bangladesh are collectively worth almost 5% of its 2022 GDP. Of these 49, 21 are in the finance sector, 5 are in the healthcare or pharmaceuticals, and the most valuable provides telecommunication services. We may never know the true owners of these companies, but let's say that there is no apparent monopoly going on there. What are these companies doing to address one of the worst minimum wages in the world? I would say that international businesses love to hire some cheap outsourced labor, and Bangladesh has plenty to offer. I mean, it's not people's fault since they have to pay their bills, but will Bangladesh ever stand up to companies that exploit cheaper services? The national companies themselves also love to be in a country with a huge population. For example, pharmaceuticals. I would constantly need meds, earning a miserable salary, working my arse off in the most air-polluted country, maybe with a family to provide for. Finance. It's self-explanatory. People may not earn much, but I bet most have a bank account. And telecommunications. Internet has become almost as essential as water and electricity for most people, so it's not hard to see why Grameenphone is the most valuable company. As for exports, they accounted for almost 14% of its GDP in 2022, with clothing and accessories being the most exported items by far. This is not a significant percentage, even compared to developed countries. The problem is that Bangladesh is clearly being exploited to produce the sneakers little Jimmy will wear to school tomorrow at a lower cost. Can't Bangladesh apply the same effort into creating their own brand of clothes, offering the same quality at reasonable prices for locals? I don't want to sound unfair, as I don't know the inner workings of these companies, but here's an example. Since Bangladesh is a major producer of Mike's products at lower labor costs, shouldn't the people of Bangladesh have access to these goods at affordable prices too? What is Mike really doing in return of their much cheaper labor? Like I mentioned in my last video, the country has lots of problems to be solved, such as undernourishment, poor waste management, and unsafe drinking water. Shouldn't Bangladesh focus on solving these first, before selling their time and energy manufacturing for companies like Mike or Abibas? By the way, I don't want to aimlessly criticize the country. Through my research for these videos, I've grown to admire the resilience of Bangladeshi people. I really look forward to seeing you thrive in the future, but for that, we must all expose what hasn't worked so far. Parties. Not those kind of parties. Political parties. The country seems to be mainly owned by three parties: the Bangladesh Nationalist Party, the Jatiya Party, and the Bangladesh Awami League, which the current president, Mohammad Shahabuddin, forgive me for my pronunciation, is part of since 2023, with his mandate expected to last until April of 2028. As a foreigner, I don't want to spread any misleading information about a country I mostly know through a screen. However, if I had to guess, I'd say these three parties are essentially one and the same, even with the Awami League being the most popular, considering most of the presidents and parliament members elected in the country's history are part of it. While more than 100 million people have been fighting over who's the best before every election, politicians have been playing their game of musical chairs, not focusing on fixing what's broken in the country. Again, I don't want to sound unfair, as I'm sure many legitimate battles have been fought throughout the country's history, but you're telling me that 175 million people can't fix a territory that is not even among the largest in the world? Where's the community mindset? A few thousand politicians play their politician games term after term, while a nation of this size sees little to no progress? Not to mention corruption. If at least those few thousands were reliable, Bangladesh is considered one of the most corrupt countries in the world, according to the Corruption Perceptions Index. Keep in mind that this perception is based on exposed cases. Imagine what remains undiscovered. There's plenty of footage on the internet of people rallying for various causes, the end of corruption being one of them. However, seeing that the country's corruption score is the worst since 2012, it's hard to believe these efforts have been very effective. It wouldn't be surprising if some of these rallies were staged or involved paid actors. If they are generally making an effort, imagine the state of things if they weren't. To name a few of the most notable cases, the Padma Bridge scandal. What was supposed to improve lives and boost the country's prosperity fell victim to some greedy and corrupt wrongdoers, not to call them something else. The World Bank initially loaned Bangladesh around $1 billion for the project, but withdrew its support after corruption allegations surfaced. To make matters worse, discussions about the bridge's feasibility began in the 1990s, if not earlier, yet it wasn't completed until 2022. Sonali Bank and Basic Bank scandals. Two of the country's largest state-owned banks were defrauded of nearly $1 billion, marking some of the worst corruption scandals in Bangladesh's history. On top of that, much of the stolen money remains unrecovered, and none of those involved have faced prosecution to this day. Bangladesh Bank's cyber heist. In 2016, hackers stole $81 million from Bangladesh Bank, exposing severe negligence and weaknesses in the country's cybersecurity systems. With these examples, I think it is fair to see that the people of Bangladesh are owned by their government and the corruption that coexists with them. Okay, I'm no economist. I just have this humble channel with the intention of questioning whether the country is doing well or not. With that out of the way, it is well known to some that Bangladesh excels in the ready-made garments industry, being the second largest exporter after China. But again, my beloved Bangladeshis, how can a country with almost 175 million people have more than 90% of its exports in clothing-related products only? Tell me, what would you do if the countries like the USA and Germany decided, I don't want to import clothes anymore? That would be almost $60 billion less for you guys, based on numbers from 2022. I believe you're capable of doing much more, while still excelling at making garments and all. You have the horsepower. Use most of that energy into developing other sectors in your own country first. There's another situation where Bangladesh relies on other countries, mostly China and Japan, for infrastructure investments. Please, experts out there, enlighten me as to why Bangladesh cannot build their own bridges. When it comes to investments, it is expected that investors will have something in return, am I right? These are just a few examples, but will Bangladesh ever start building railways and bridges in China, for instance? As of now, it's hard to imagine that, isn't it? So yeah, I think it's safe to say that you're also owned by countries such as the US, China, Japan, and the European Union. Before I conclude, I'll quickly list what can be seen as deterrents, distractions, or both. These might be additional reasons why Bangladesh isn't exploring its full potential. Keep in mind that the only ones who can truly address these issues are the people who live there. So take the following as questions aimed at Bangladeshis. I'd love to hear from you. Religion. 91%, the absolute majority, are Sunni Muslims. Just 8% identify as Hindu. There are about 300,000 mosques spread throughout the country. That's roughly one mosque for every 700 people. Based on that, I think it's fair to say that Bangladesh is quite a religious place. Please note, I'm not attacking anyone's religion, okay? I just wonder how much these mosques are contributing to the development of the country, but that's not for me to answer. Schools. I couldn't find reliable data, but the country seems to have a sufficient number of schools and universities to accommodate the student population. But I question the quality of these facilities, given the limited investment in education, as I mentioned in my previous video. I also wonder whether the education provided is preparing future generations for success, or if these institutions serve more as tools for indoctrination. Police and the military. Wow, that came as a surprise. You guys have the third largest military force in the world, just behind South and North Korea, with almost 6.5 million people. Even though most of these are paramilitary, not part of the country's official armed forces. But anyways, what are you doing with that many people? Playing soldier out there while the country collapses on itself? And from what I could see, the police force seems to be quite active as well. Taxation. Well, I don't really know how bad it is, but according to this ranking, Bangladesh has a reasonable tax rate if compared to other countries. But if I were a part of a greedy government, I'd love to have this many people to tax. By taxing $10 from every Bengali, I would have almost $2 billion. The question is, can you see your tax money being used for development across the country? Government allowances. Government assistance programs are totally valid, but do you feel there is an over-reliance on them? I couldn't find any data on this, but I bet lots of people indeed need those. Drugs. As mentioned in my last video, according to the National Police Department, drugs seem to be quite the issue there. If I had to guess, addicts just want to escape their reality. I'm sorry, and you may disagree with me, but if your main source of fun is getting high, it's suggested that your life likely sucks. I do really hope Bangladesh can overcome this challenge as soon as possible. I saw a heartbreaking video of two kids who were high, probably on glue. Hopefully this is not a common event there. In this globalized world we find ourselves in, it is common to have countries that own and others that are owned. We've normalized this, and it's probably too late to change it. Don't get me wrong, we should always support each other to constantly improve, just as nations should. But it really feels like people have been tamed by this system, not only in Bangladesh. The topics I've discussed today focus on only one country, but this happens worldwide in different proportions. I'm not encouraging any riots, but it's beyond me how such a large population can be controlled by a bunch of politicians and people with a couple of $1 million. Overt nationalism can also be harmful, but it would be cool to see locals prioritize its people first. All of this to say that the potential of the country is limited by someone else's greed and everyone else's complacency. Tell me, Bangladeshis, from your perspective, do you feel like the country has improved? Do you want it to change, or is it fine the way it is? As for me, I'll be looking forward to hearing better news about Bangladesh. Thank you again for making it this far into the video. This is the second of an intended series of videos about Bangladesh and, who knows, eventually other countries. If you enjoyed the content and would like to see more of these, let me know by liking, commenting, subscribing, and, if possible, sharing this video. Stay healthy and question everything. See you in the next one.